58 million people live in a country shaped like a boot kicking a football into the Mediterranean, where 58 UNESCO World Heritage Sites make Italy the most listed nation on Earth, and where the concentration of art, architecture, food, and history per square kilometer is so dense that entire lifetimes of culture exist in towns most travelers drive past on the motorway without stopping. Italy is the country everyone thinks they know, from films, food, and fashion. But the gap between the postcard version and the reality is vast enough to swallow every expectation you arrive with. Because the beauty is staggering, but the bureaucracy is maddening. The food is the best on the planet, but the service can be indifferent. And the monuments are breathtaking, but the crowds at the famous ones have reached levels that make you question whether the experience is worth the queue. The North is wealthy, industrialized, and quietly resentful of subsidizing the South, while the South is poorer, warmer, louder, and convinced that the North has no soul. And this tension between the two halves of a country that has only been unified since 1861 explains more about Italy than any guidebook ever will. Subscribe to Passport Unfolded and see Italy as it actually is, from Rome's ruins to Sicily's volcanoes, from Venetian canals to Sardinian beaches, all magnificent, all maddening, all unmistakably Italian. Rome is a city where 3,000 years of history are layered so densely that construction workers regularly discover ancient ruins when digging foundations. And the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the Forum, and the Trevi Fountain represent barely a fraction of what survives in a capital that was the center of an empire controlling the entire Mediterranean world. The city is chaotic, the traffic terrifying, and the pickpockets professional. Yet the beauty of light on travertine at sunset and the pleasure of eating cacio e pepe in a side street trattoria make the frustrations feel like a reasonable price to pay for living inside what is essentially an open-air museum, where every corner reveals another century of human achievement. Vatican City is the smallest independent state in the world at 44 hectares, entirely enclosed within Rome, housing the Sistine Chapel, whose ceiling Michelangelo painted over 4 years while complaining constantly about the commission. And the Vatican museums containing one of the world's greatest art collections accumulated over centuries of papal patronage. And St. Peter's Basilica, whose dome dominates the Roman skyline as both an engineering triumph and a statement of religious authority. The queues for the museums can exceed 3 hours in peak season, and the crowds inside the Sistine Chapel are dense enough that the guards' constant shushing creates its own background noise. But the quality of what is on display justifies every minute spent waiting. Florence is the birthplace of the Renaissance, a city where Brunelleschi's dome over the cathedral remains an engineering marvel 5 centuries after completion, and where the Uffizi Gallery contains Botticelli's Birth of Venus and works by Leonardo, Raphael, and Caravaggio in a collection that would take weeks to properly absorb. The city is small enough to walk across in an afternoon, but rich enough to occupy a month. With the Ponte Vecchio spanning the Arno, the Palazzo Pitti and its gardens, and Michelangelo's David at the Accademia, creating a concentration of genius that no other city of comparable size can match. Though the tourist density in summer makes the narrow medieval streets feel genuinely suffocating. Venice is a city built on 118 islands, connected by over 400 bridges across a lagoon, where the absence of cars creates a silence broken only by water, footsteps, and the occasional gondolier's call, and where the Palazzo Ducale, St. Mark's Basilica, and the Grand Canal palaces represent the accumulated wealth of a maritime republic that dominated Mediterranean trade for centuries. The city is sinking and flooding with increasing frequency as aqua alta events become more severe. The resident population has fallen below 50,000 as locals flee the cost and the over-tourism. And the cruise ships that were banned from the main channel still arrive at alternative docks, raising questions about whether Venice can survive as a living city or is destined to become a museum. Milan is Italy's financial and fashion capital, a city that locals insist is more European than Italian. With the Duomo Cathedral taking nearly 6 centuries to complete in a Gothic extravagance of marble spires and over 3,000 statues. The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci, viewable only with advance reservations in timed 15-minute slots. And the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, serving as both historic shopping arcade and runway for the city's obsession with appearance. The city hosts Fashion Week and Furniture Fair as events of global significance. And the Navigli Canal District provides the nightlife, restaurant scene, and creative energy that the gleaming business districts of Porta Nuova lack during the working day. Naples is the city that Italians themselves call chaotic, dangerous, and magnificent in the same breath. And sitting beneath Vesuvius in a location that is spectacular and existentially threatening since the volcano that destroyed Pompeii remains active, and over 3 million people live within its potential blast zone without any realistic evacuation plan. The historic center is a UNESCO site of crumbling palaces, laundry-strung alleys, and street life operating at a volume unmatched anywhere else in Italy. And the pizza here is not just food, but religion. With the margherita having been invented in Naples and the local pizzerias defending their dough recipes with a seriousness that outsiders find bewildering, but locals consider a matter of civic identity. The Amalfi Coast is a 50-kilometer stretch of southern Italian coastline where mountains drop vertically into the Tyrrhenian Sea and villages cling to cliff sides connected by a single road so narrow that the bus rides are genuine tests of nerve as vehicles negotiate blind corners with centimeters to spare above sheer drops to the sea below. The coast was a UNESCO-listed maritime republic in the medieval period, and the Cathedral of Amalfi, with its Arab Norman architecture, reflects centuries of Mediterranean trade that brought influences from across the region. The beauty is undeniable, but the summer crowds, the traffic gridlock, and the prices that rival the French Riviera make timing and budget critical considerations for any visit. Positano is the Amalfi Coast's most photographed village. You're cascading down a steep cliff to a small beach in a tumble of pastel-colored houses that appears designed specifically for Instagram. Though the village existed for centuries before anyone thought to photograph it, and the beauty is genuine rather than manufactured. The streets are almost entirely vertical staircases. The shops sell linen clothing and handmade sandals at prices reflecting the captive audience. And the restaurants, perched on terraces, serve seafood with views that justify charges that would be outrageous anywhere without the scenery. Getting there by public ferry from Sorrento or Amalfi avoids the road traffic and provides the coastal approach that reveals Positano at its most dramatic. Capri is the island in the Bay of Naples that has attracted emperors, writers, and celebrities since Tiberius built his villa here 2,000 years ago. And the Blue Grotto a sea cave where sunlight entering through an underwater opening creates an electric blue glow on the water's surface. Remains the island's most famous attraction, despite the brief and expensive boat ride required to enter, lasting barely 5 minutes. The town of Capri is designer boutiques and gelato at prices that would make a Milanese wince. While Capri, higher up the mountain, offers quieter streets and the chairlift to Monte Solaro with its panoramic views across the bay to Vesuvius, the Sorrentine coast, and on clear days, the distant outline of the Amalfi Coast. Pompeii is the Roman city frozen in time by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD. Buried under meters of volcanic ash that preserved streets, buildings, frescoes, and the plaster casts of victims in positions capturing the terror of their final moments with an immediacy that no other archaeological site can match. The excavated area covers over 44 hectares and includes houses, temples, a forum, an amphitheater, and even a brothel. Whose explicit frescoes served as a menu for clients, all preserved beneath the ash that killed the inhabitants but saved their world for posterity. The site requires at least half a day to explore properly and is best visited with a guide who can explain what the bare walls once looked like beneath their original painted plaster. Cinque Terre is 5 fishing villages clinging to the Ligurian coast, connected by hiking trails and a railway with Monterosso, Vernazza, Corniglia, Manarola, and Rio Maggiore, creating a landscape of colorful houses stacked above harbors so small that boats are pulled onto rocks rather than moored at docks. The villages were isolated until the railway and hiking trails brought tourists, and the transformation from fishing communities to tourist destinations has been rapid enough that older residents remember when the economy depended on anchovies and wine terraces rather than Airbnb rentals. The summer crowds are suffocating, but visiting in the shoulder season, when the light is golden and the trails are quiet, reveals the beauty that made these villages famous in the first place. Pisa's Leaning Tower is the monument that everyone photographs and almost nobody understands. Because the tower is the bell tower of a cathedral complex in the Piazza dei Miracoli that includes the cathedral itself. And the baptistry and the monumental cemetery, all of which are architecturally more significant than the tower, but receive a fraction of the attention because they happen to stand straight. The Lean began during construction in the 12th century due to soft ground on one side. And engineering interventions in the late 20th century stabilized the tower and slightly reduced the tilt to ensure it remains standing for future centuries. Beyond the piazza, Pisa is a lively university city with a historic center that most tourists never bother to explore. Siena is the medieval Tuscan city, whose shell-shaped Piazza del Campo hosts the Palio horse race twice each summer. A bareback competition between the city's contrade that generates rivalry so intense that the alliances and betrayals surrounding the race define Sienese social life year-round in ways that outsiders find difficult to comprehend. The cathedral is a masterpiece of Italian Gothic, with a marble facade of extraordinary intricacy and an interior containing works by Donatello, Michelangelo, and Bernini that would be the highlight of any other city but here compete for attention with the piazza itself. The medieval street plan survives almost entirely intact, and the absence of modern intrusions creates an atmosphere that transports visitors to the 14th century more convincingly than any other city in Italy. The Val d'Orcia is the UNESCO-listed landscape of rolling hills, cypress-lined roads, and isolated farmhouses that defines the world's image of rural Tuscany. A landscape so photogenic that it appears in Renaissance paintings, wine labels, and desktop wallpapers with equal frequency, and looks exactly as beautiful in person as it does in photographs. The region produces Brunello di Montalcino and Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, wines whose quality reflects the terroir of volcanic soil and Mediterranean climate, and the hill towns of Pienza, Montalcino, and Montepulciano each offer historic centers. Local pecorino cheese and wine tastings and views across valleys that look precisely as you imagined Tuscany would look before you ever arrived. A Lake Como is the Y-shaped lake in Lombardy, whose dramatic setting of deep blue water surrounded by steep mountains and lined with grand villas has attracted the wealthy since Roman times. With Pliny the Elder owning property here and George Clooney maintaining the tradition 2 millennia later at a price point that has driven local property values to levels that ordinary Italians find offensive. The towns of Bellagio, Varenna, and Menaggio are connected by ferry and offer waterfront dining, villa gardens open to visitors, and views across water so blue and mountains so green that the scenery appears digitally enhanced even when seen in person. The lake is genuinely beautiful, but the prices reflect the clientele, and budget travelers find that Como's beauty comes at a cost. Lake Garda is Italy's largest lake, and stretching from the flat plains of Lombardy to the mountains of Trentino. In a transition from Mediterranean to alpine, visible in the vegetation, changing from olive groves and lemon trees in the south to pine forests and snow-capped peaks in the north. The town of Sirmione sits on a peninsula extending into the southern lake, with a medieval Scaliger castle and Roman ruins at its tip. While the northern towns of Riva del Garda and Limone sul Garda offer water sports, hiking, and dramatic cliffside roads. The lake attracts German and Austrian visitors in numbers that make the northern shore feel distinctly more Bavarian than Italian. During the summer months, when the campgrounds and holiday apartments are fully booked. Verona is the city of Romeo and Juliet. Though the balcony tourist's photograph was added to a medieval house in the 1930s to satisfy demand for a location that Shakespeare never specified because he never visited Italy, and set his plays here based on Italian source material he read in London. The Roman arena in the city centre seats 22,000 and hosts opera performances during summer in acoustics and atmosphere that make it one of the world's great outdoor venues, where Aida and Carmen are performed against a backdrop of 2,000-year-old stone. The Piazza delle Erbe, the churches of San Zeno and Sant'Anastasia, and the Castelvecchio Bridge create a historic center that rewards exploration well beyond the fictional balcony. Bologna is the food capital of Italy, in a country where every region claims culinary supremacy. But Bologna's case is strong because ragu and tortellini, mortadella, and lasagna all originate here. And the commitment to quality ingredients and traditional preparation makes eating in Bologna a daily reminder that Italian food at its source bears little resemblance to what the rest of the world serves under the same name. The university, founded in 1088, is the oldest in the Western world and gives the city a student population that keeps the nightlife vibrant and the intellectual culture alive. The porticos lining the streets for over 40 kilometers are UNESCO listed and provide covered walkways, making Bologna one of the few Italian cities that is genuinely pleasant to walk through in the rain. Matera is the city of Sassi, an ancient cave dwellings carved into ravine walls that were inhabited continuously from the Paleolithic until the 1950s, when the Italian government forcibly relocated residents from conditions described as a national disgrace, with families sharing caves with their livestock in poverty and disease that shamed a nation claiming post-war modernization. The caves have been transformed into boutique hotels, restaurants, and museums in a regeneration so successful that Matera was named European Capital of Culture in 2019. And the views across the ravine at night, when the cave dwellings are illuminated, create a landscape that appears genuinely biblical, which is precisely why multiple films depicting ancient Jerusalem have been shot here rather than in the actual city. Palermo is the Sicilian capital, where Arab Norman architecture reflects the island's history as a crossroads of Mediterranean civilizations, with the Palazzo dei Normanni, the Cappella Palatina's gold mosaics, and the cathedral creating a visual record of rulers who included Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Normans, Spanish, and Bourbons before Italian unification brought the island into the modern state. The street markets of Ballaro and Vuciraya operate with an energy that feels more North African than European. And the street food, including arancini, panelli, and pane con la milza, is among the best and cheapest in Italy. The city is raw and magnificent in equal measure, with crumbling palaces beside Baroque churches reflecting centuries of wealth, followed by decades of neglect. "20 places across the most beautiful country on Earth. And we haven't even started on the islands, the mountains, or the north." Subscribe to Passport Unfolded because 15 more Italian destinations await, each one proving that this country's beauty is matched only by its complexity. Taormina is the Sicilian resort town, perched on a cliff above the Ionian Sea, with the ancient Greek theatre providing the stage for one of the most photographed views in the Mediterranean. Framing Mount Etna's snow-capped summit between crumbling columns in a composition that has attracted travelers since the Grand Tour era, when wealthy Europeans considered a visit here essential to a civilized education. The Corso Umberto is the pedestrian main street, lined with boutiques, gelaterias, and restaurants at prices reflecting Taormina's status as Sicily's most exclusive destination. The town is beautiful, but sanitized compared to the raw energy of Palermo or Catania. and the beach below requires a cable car descent that adds logistical complexity to what should be a simple swim. Mount Etna is Europe's tallest and most active volcano at approximately 3,300 meters. Though the height changes with each eruption as the summit craters build and collapse in a cycle continuing for over 500,000 years. The volcano dominates eastern Sicily, and its eruptions are frequent enough that locals treat them with a familiarity that visitors find genuinely unsettling. Continuing their daily routines while lava flows down the mountainside and ash settles on their laundry. The cable car and guided excursions reached the upper slopes, where the lunar landscape of craters, lava fields, and sulfurous vents creates an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in Italy. And the wines produced on the volcanic soil are increasingly recognized as among Sicily's finest. Sardinia is Italy's second-largest island, with Costa Smeralda beaches of white sand and turquoise water that rival the Caribbean while costing considerably more. And an interior of rugged mountains, cork forests, and ancient Nuraghi stone towers from a Bronze Age civilization that left over 7,000 mysterious structures scattered across the landscape in a density that no other Mediterranean island can match. The island's culture is distinct from mainland Italy, with its own language, a cuisine emphasizing roast suckling pig and sharp pecorino cheese, and a pace of life that operates independently of the urgency characterizing Rome or Milan. And the beaches draw most visitors, but the interior rewards exploration with a Sardinia that the luxury resort marketing rarely acknowledges. The Dolomites are a mountain range in northeastern Italy whose pale limestone peaks rise in jagged towers that turn pink at sunrise and sunset in a phenomenon called enrosadura that makes the mountains appear to glow from within, as if the rock itself were lit by some internal fire. The UNESCO-listed range spans South Tyrol, Trentino, and Veneto, with ski resorts operating in winter and hiking trails in summer, traversing high passes, green valleys, and refugi mountain huts where hikers eat hearty meals and sleep in dormitories before continuing along trails that many consider the finest mountain scenery in Europe. The culture here is as much Austrian as Italian. With German spoken as a first language in South Tyrol, and the architecture, food, and mentality reflecting centuries of Habsburg rule. Genoa is the port city that was once a maritime republic, rivaling Venice, the birthplace of Christopher Columbus, and a city whose historic center is one of the largest medieval quarters in Europe, with narrow Carugi alleys creating a labyrinth that is atmospheric during the day and intimidating after dark when the shadows deepen and the tourist crowds thin. The Strade Nuove and the Palazzi dei Rolli are UNESCO-listed Renaissance palaces that were built to house visiting dignitaries and demonstrate Genoese wealth to foreign powers in a system of compulsory hospitality that was unique in Europe. The city's pesto originates here, and the focaccia is among the best bred in Italy. While the waterfront Porto Antico, redeveloped by Renzo Piano, has given the old port a contemporary cultural life. Turin is the former capital of the Kingdom of Sardinia and the city where Italian unification was planned. A grand city of Baroque architecture, arcaded streets, and a refined elegance that reflects its royal past more than its industrial present as the home of Fiat. And the automotive industry that powered Italy's post-war economic miracle. The Egyptian Museum is the most important collection of Egyptian antiquities outside Cairo. The Mole Antonelliana houses the National Cinema Museum in a tower that defines the skyline. And the cafe culture in Turin's historic coffee houses, where Lavazza was born, is arguably the finest in Italy. The city also claims to house the Shroud of Turin, and the controversial linen cloth bearing the image of a crucified man that draws believers and skeptics in roughly equal numbers. Assisi is the Umbrian hilltop town where St. Francis was born in 1181, and the Basilica of San Francesco, containing Giotto's fresco cycle of the saint's life, draws pilgrims and art historians in equal numbers to a church whose upper and lower levels represent one of the most important collections of medieval Italian painting anywhere in the world. The town is pink limestone and quiet streets with views across the Umbrian Plain to Perugia. And the atmosphere retains a spiritual quality that decades of commercialization have not entirely erased. Despite the souvenir shops selling St. Francis figurines beside the monastery gates. The 1997 earthquake damaged the basilica's frescoes, and the painstaking restoration demonstrated both the fragility and the resilience of Italy's artistic heritage. Ravenna is the city of mosaics, capital of the Western Roman Empire in its final years, and later the seat of Byzantine power in Italy. With the Basilica of San Vitale, the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia, and Santa Apollinare Nuovo, containing gold ground mosaics that represent the finest surviving examples of Byzantine art anywhere in the world. And justify the journey to a city that sits outside most tourist itineraries. The mosaics date from the 5th and 6th centuries, with the gold tesserae catching light in ways that make the interiors glow with a warmth that photographs cannot adequately capture. The city is quiet and overlooked by tourists heading to Florence or Venice, which makes the experience of standing alone before 1,500-year-old mosaics all the more powerful. Alberobello is the Pulian town of Trulli. Whitewashed limestone houses with conical grey roofs unique to southern Italy, whose construction without mortar supposedly allowed owners to disassemble them when tax inspectors arrived. Though historians debate whether this charming origin story is folklore or historical fact. The Rione Monti district contains over 1,000 trulli packed along sloping streets in a concentration dense enough to create a landscape that appears almost fictional in its uniformity. As if an entire neighborhood had been designed by a single architect with a fondness for cones. The town is UNESCO listed and heavily touristed in summer. Though early morning walks before the souvenir shops open reveal the architectural charm beneath the commercial surface. Puglia is the heel of Italy's boot, a region of olive groves stretching to every horizon. Romanesque cathedrals in white stone, and a coastline alternating between sandy beaches and dramatic limestone cliffs above the Adriatic, where the water is clear enough to see the seabed from the cliff tops above. The region produces more olive oil than any other in Italy, with ancient gnarled trees lining every road. As both agricultural assets and landscape features that define the Puglian visual identity. The cuisine centers on simplicity with orecchiette pasta, burrata cheese, and seafood prepared with the quality ingredients the region provides. And the relative affordability compared to Tuscany or the Amalfi Coast makes Puglia increasingly popular with travelers seeking Italian beauty without premium pricing. Trieste sits at Italy's northeastern edge on the Slovenian border. A city that was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire until 1918, and whose grand Habsburg architecture, Viennese coffeehouses, and literary tradition make it feel like a Central European city that happens to speak Italian rather than an Italian city with Central European influences. The Piazza Unità d'Italia opens directly onto the sea as one of Europe's largest waterfront squares. And the literary heritage includes James Joyce, who lived here for over a decade writing much of Ulysses and Italo Svevo, whose modernist novels were crafted in a city whose identity has always been defined by borders. From the Miramare Castle on the coast and the wild karst plateau behind the city add natural beauty to the cultural richness. Portofino is the tiny Ligurian fishing village that became a playground for the wealthy in the mid-20th century, with the horseshoe harbor, pastel facades, and hillside of Mediterranean pines, creating a setting so perfect it appears staged. Which in many ways it is, since the entire village functions as a luxury brand rather than a working community where anyone actually fishes anymore. The harbor holds perhaps 50 boats, and the village has fewer than 400 residents. Yet the restaurants charge prices that would be ambitious in central London, and the boutiques cater to yacht owners anchoring offshore. But the walk to the lighthouse and the church of San Giorgio above the village offer views that are freely available, genuinely spectacular, and proof that the best of Portofino costs nothing. Bergamo is divided between the modern Città Bassa on the plain and the medieval Città Alta on the hilltop, connected by a funicular climbing to a walled upper town of cobbled streets. Venetian-era architecture and views across the Lombard Plain to Milan on clear days when the haze lifts enough to reveal the skyline. The Cappella Colleoni is a Renaissance masterpiece whose ornate facade was commissioned by the mercenary captain Bartolomeo Colleoni as his funerary chapel, in a display of wealth and ego that remains impressive 5 centuries later. The upper town is small enough to explore in a half day, and the restaurants serve casoncelli. As the local stuffed pasta in trattorias where the clientele is predominantly local rather than tourist. A genuine rarity in Italian cities of this beauty. Parma is the city of Parmigiano Reggiano and Prosciutto di Parma, 2 products whose names are legally protected and whose production follows regulations so strict that the cheese must age a minimum of 12 months and the ham at least 12, with the best examples requiring years of patient maturation in cellars where the air and temperature are monitored with obsessive attention. The baptistery's Romanesque Gothic exterior is one of the finest in Italy. The cathedral contains Correggio's extraordinary dome frescoes, creating an illusion of heaven opening above the viewer. And the Teatro Farnese is a wooden theatre from 1618 that prefigured the modern opera house. Parma is wealthy, as quiet and proud of its food traditions, and eating here with attention to local specialties is as important as visiting the monuments. Perugia is the capital of Umbria, a hilltop university city whose Palazzo dei Priori, the Fontana Maggiore, and the Galleria Nazionale dell'Umbria, with its collection of Umbrian Renaissance painting by Perugino and Pinturicchio, create a historic center that is both grand and intimate in equal measure. The university and the Università per Stranieri give the city a cosmopolitan population that keeps the nightlife and cafe culture vibrant year-round, regardless of the tourist season. The Umbria Jazz Festival in July fills the medieval streets with international performers and music lovers, and the city's central position makes it an ideal base for exploring Assisi, Spoleto, or Vieto. And the smaller hill towns that make Umbria a quieter alternative to Tuscany. Italy is the country that has more of everything beautiful than anywhere else on Earth, yet manages to frustrate, confuse, and exhaust its visitors with equal consistency because the beauty never exists without the chaos. The art never exists without the queue, and the food never exists without the argument about whether you are eating it correctly. The North and South remain different countries sharing a flag. The economy struggles while the culture thrives, and the monuments that draw 60 million tourists a year are simultaneously Italy's greatest asset and its heaviest burden. But no country on Earth rewards the traveler more generously for showing up, slowing down, and paying attention. And subscribe to Passport Unfolded for more journeys through countries that are more complicated than the postcards suggest. 35 places across Italy, from Rome to Perugia, from the Dolomites to Sicily, all beautiful, all chaotic, all unmistakably, irreplaceably Italian.